move forward, right? And so we've got to make sure that we stay focused on the priorities of this district and that we keep our eye on the ball here. It doesn't mean that we don't learn from our mistakes. That's the other piece that I think the district is really bad at, is not learning from its mistakes so that we don't repeat them in the future. And we have to bring technology into that conversation. We can't ignore that. Technology is a tool that our kids need in order to be successful in business and college, in their careers, in life. And so we can't run away from that fact that we've got to have a very thoughtful and deep conversation about what our plans are going to be about ensuring that our kids have the right tools and resources to learn. So we can't keep bringing the iPad thing back up if we're not, in order to be able to then have a conversation about, so what does the future look like around technology? And so I think we've got to learn from the past. We've got to stop bringing it up just as a point of contention, and we've got to just start being thoughtful and deep around how we're going to move forward.
Yes, I can make the question. Sorry, I just repeat the point this time. Given the recent controversies with the iPad, allegations of conflicts of interest, FBI investigation, and leadership changes, how will you address these issues so as to not distract from more important issues that are important to students and parents alike?
Okay, I guess there are two things I have to say about the iPad issue. It is fair to bring it up. I know it's like looking backwards. I don't think it needs to be brought up in the future on the next board very much. But the current board should take responsibility for making that decision. They did make that decision. The Bond Oversight Committee also agreed with that, and they decided to spend the money that way. So it's very fair for us to discuss this in an election where we're trying to decide whether the current board should stay the same or whether it should change. So the whole argument is that they made a bad decision. Who's to stop them from making another bad decision, especially if they don't take responsibility for that decision? And that's why we bring up the iPad over and over again. I think there's some things about technology that are interesting to discuss in this. But probably the biggest learning that I take, and the district doesn't learn this very well, they should learn it, is that there is not a one-size-fits-all solution to so many of our problems. I mean, I was talking to somebody who had iPads in an elementary school. It was a private elementary school, actually, and they really liked the iPads. They worked really well for the curriculum in that school. It turns out that iPads are pretty bad for 11th graders and 12th graders trying to take tests and do critical writing. And why the district thought that we should buy the same technology for every school, for all levels of school, without knowing whether the teachers and the schools were ready for that technology, I think that that's a key point that we really need to ask ourselves over and over again, because the district does make that exact same mistake. They think there's a problem somewhere, and then they think of a solution, and it's going to be a solution for 650,000 kids at hundreds and hundreds of elementary schools, a bunch of middle schools, a bunch of high schools that all have. High school and middle school is much, much different from elementary school. And even schedule-wise, curriculum-wise, technology-wise, we need to stop thinking about these schools as one big block that have the same needs.
Mr. President?
Let's make something clear. There are 7 members of the school board. I'm one of them, and I never voted once for the iPads under John Dacey's program. The one time I voted for iPads was because there was a state requirement for the state testing that the kids have keyboards and computers. Actually, the iPads that the district bought didn't have keyboards, so the kids wouldn't have been able to do the critical writing and test taking. But I resisted that. So just, once again, 7 members on the school board, there were either 6-1 votes or 6-0 votes because I recused myself. I happen to own 13 shares of Apple Computer before it went up, by the way, and I sold it so I could participate again in board meetings. But that's got to be clear. The iPads were... the concept of one-on-one computing and having every child have a computer is a good idea. It's one actually back when I was in Pasadena. I was trying to put together a program, but it just didn't pencil out in terms of the money available versus the cost of that technology back in the 1990s. But now that technology is cheaper, it makes sense to do that. But you've got to have a plan. What happened with and I'm sorry to keep looking back, but what you have to do is you have to realize that we bought like 100,000 iPads and didn't know what to do with them after they came in. There was no training in particular for the teachers. Those who had been using them on their own, with their own devices, put some use to it, but it generally wasn't something that the teachers or anybody else knew what to do with.
Thank you. We will now have a 30-second rebuttal. I'll call the candidate name, and if they choose to rebut, they can. If they choose not, they can decline. Okay? And this one we started with Mr. Rodriguez. Would you like to do a rebuttal? Yeah. Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, I'll actually do a rebuttal. I think that there's a big difference between not being part of the problem and being the solution. And that's a distinction that we're trying to make today. I mean, I'm glad that my school board member says that he wasn't part of the problem, but I actually want a school board member who fixes problems. So it's taking the next step. It's actually preventing bad things from happening. It's actually improving things. I'm glad he's not making things worse, but I want more than that.
I would love to put the iPad issue far behind. I wish that we could get our money back and return the iPad. I wish that the superintendent hadn't done what he did, that brought the FBI in and other agencies to look at conflict of interest and other irregularities in the system that I can't really talk about because it's a confidential issue and while the FBI investigation is going on. But let me say that I wish that we didn't have to think about this in the future, but unfortunately I think it's going to be around for a while.
Thank you.
You bet on that.
I'm going to ask that all candidates please stop at their time. So either when you hear the beep or you hear me say thank you, to please stop because we still have a lot of questions to get through still. This next question is from Luis Sanchez, and we will begin this question now with Mr. Thomas. And this is for all the questions. Do you believe that students should be continuously promoted in K through 8th grade, even though so much is spent on during an after-school intervention? Do you believe that students should be continuously socially promoted in K through 8th grade, even though so much is spent on during and after-school intervention?
I'm not sure I understand the question completely. Social promotion means that if somebody's in 6th grade and they don't get good grades, they still go to 7th grade. And we in the LAUSD we don't stop promoting kids until 9th grade. I haven't really studied the research on that issue. My inclination is to give kids as much extra support as they can and make sure they get to 9th grade. I don't think we should be keeping kids back in 7th grade and 6th grade and 5th grade, but I'd be open to other arguments on that and to hear what people are saying. I know in other districts they do fail kids in elementary school, so I hope to be educated more about that.
Thank you.
You know, it goes back to the whole one-size-fits-all. So everything looks the same in this district and actually in education in general. And that's partly because educators are not making the decisions, not locally anyway. And what that means is if you're failing a couple classes or you're not doing so well in secondary education around English language arts or history, and yet you've mastered the rest of them, well, you still get held back, right? And so that's why social promotion was. Well, the solution here is that you shouldn't be held back if you have mastered most things but are lacking in some areas. And what you do is you close the gap in those areas, right? So if you have multi-age classrooms, if you had teams of teachers, parents, and teachers, the parents, and the student making the decision that is best for that individual student, then you can decide whether or not that kid moves along and what interventions to do. Family support teams are critical, and those things have to start early. So as a kid is not getting and mastering the material, those teachers need to be involved, parents need to be involved, we've got to intervene early. And we tend to kind of just leave things as they are and wait till the last minute and say, oops, the kid can't go because, or the kid has to go because he's a 4th grader and he's 10 years old, we've got to put him in 5th grade. That one-size-fits-all doesn't work because our kids are different. Our kids learn differently. Developmentally appropriate education is something we've got to start looking into. And as a society, we have to not shame kids because they learn at their own rate. Just because you're 9 doesn't mean that you are able to do 4th grade work, or maybe you're able to do 10th grade work. But the system doesn't work that way for our kids. It's if you can't learn it right now, we're going to keep moving you forward, and God bless you, hopefully you'll be successful in 9th grade and don't drop out. Or worse yet, or equally worse, or equally bad, I'm an English language learner, so sorry. Equally bad is that you've got a kid who's mastering the material and has to stay in that place because they just happen to be 9.
Thank you. Mr. Kaiser?
Many kids who have difficulty learning have learning disabilities, and we have IEPs, or individual education plans, that the kids go to with their parents, with their teachers, with the counselor, with the school psychologist. Depends on the issue as to exactly what the makeup of the IEP committee is. I served on several IEP committees as a middle school teacher. We also have, for remediation, we have after-school programs. We have summer school. We have, at some point, we used to have winter school, and maybe when we get the calendar straightened out, we'll go back to having winter classes as well for students that need extra time, or students who need to keep their skills in use rather than having a hiatus of several weeks to have a chance to not to learn. The impression is that we're treating all kids the same, and in fact we're working individually with them as is necessary. You know, we do a lot of things at LAUSD that are good, and we haven't heard much about that from my opponents tonight. You know, we have students who won the National Academic Decathlon. We have students who won, I saw the super quiz. If you want to see smart people, you go look at those, at the hundreds of students there who answered questions in 7 seconds. But you can't figure out what the question is in my brain. But they're giving the answer already.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now we'll have a chance for a 30-second rebuttal, if you choose to do so. Mr. Thomas first. You can decline if you want to. Okay. Mr. Rodriguez?
Yeah, I believe that every child should have their own individualized education pathway, right? So those that qualify for special education by law, they have to have their IEP, but we have to treat individual kids individually, and we've got to create those pathways along with families. And we can do that. We've got the will and the resources. We just have to create a system that allows that, embraces that, and a society that actually says that's valuable. Every kid learns differently, and every kid needs to have their own individualized education pathway.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kaiser?
One other thing, and then I'll come to those good things. Just back. Well, let's do the other good things. The cyber patriots. We took the national championship 3 years in a row with that, where kids had to diagnose problems with computers like viruses, solve them, and develop programs where to keep the computers from having those kinds of problems in the future. Sponsored by the Air Force and Northrop Grumman. National champions 3 years in a row.
Thank you very much. This next set of questions, we will start off with Mr. Rodriguez. I'm going to combine two questions. They are both submitted by Dr. John Fernandez. Okay, so Latino students now comprise about 74% of the total enrollment in the LAUSD, but their graduation rates and achievements rates are still low. And a new report has found that only 41% of African American students graduate from the LAUSD. So what would you do to improve the graduation rate of African American students, and what would you do to remedy the situation of the low graduation and achievement rates for Latino students?
Thanks. Yeah, so that is fresh on my mind. That is something I think about almost daily, because especially Black and Latino boys are doing the worst in our schools. And that means that we've got sort of a school-to-prison pipeline for those kids. And that's not what public education is about. It's not what our society should be doing, and yet it is. What we need to do is make sure, it's going to be a Herculean effort where all of us have to come together. Our higher education partners, who aren't doing a really good job in some cases of training teachers. Our schools have to have high quality professional development, have to keep and retain the highest performing teachers, have to create pathways for their career so they stay in the classroom. We've got to have families involved and community involved and say, this is going to be all of us working together to get our kids where they need to be. It's not, in this case, it's not just the district, it's all of us working together. But the district also has to be open and embrace that. And we've got to stop thinking about them as statistics, as 74%. These are individuals. Because once we lump them all in together, then it's easy for us to throw away. These are individuals. They have names, they have moms, they have dads, they have community that they are a part of. We have to make our schools more human and humane. And they're not right now. In fact, many of them look like prisons. I say this also to our leaders at PUC. Follow a kid at high school for a day and see how boring it is. Sit with them, right? And then fix it, right? We don't have people that do that in our systems right now. If they just knew what torture it is to be in classrooms, they'd fix them. Instead, they're not in classrooms, right? So we've got to just make sure that we're focused on the right things. Again, it comes back to a learning first agenda, powerful teaching and learning for all kids. And remember, to me, fairness isn't giving every kid the same, it's giving every kid what he or she needs.
Thank you. Next we'll move to Mr. Kaiser and end with Mr. Thomas.
What can we do to improve graduation rate? Well, in fact, for the last 8 years, the graduation rate has been rising at LAUSD year by year by year. So it isn't like nothing is happening. It isn't like things are getting worse. The graduation rate is going up. We just had a debate at Eagle Rock High School where they have a 78% graduation rate. It's actually higher.
I think it's higher.
Yes, that was the old number. In any case, the graduation rate has been going up. The board, and once again, I'm only one member of a 7-member board, voted 2 years ago to change the number of credits required for graduation from 260 down to 200, thereby eliminating opportunities to take enrichment electives and some of the things that you've heard about from all three of us tonight. I've brought back a resolution as a compromise with the other board members to bring it back up to 230, but that's barely enough to get into the University of California. You look to see which students are admitted, and it's students who have taken 260 credits or more. So we need to bring back the line to 260. That will also allow for a reduction in class size, having more classes to meet the needs of the students. So there's a tangible thing that can be done right away. And I think with the new makeup of the board, that we'll start seeing improvements come at that time.
Thank you. Mr. Thomas?
Could you just repeat the number of parts of that question again? What was the percentage?
41% of African Americans, only 41% of African American students graduate from the LAUSD, and Latino students comprise about 74% of the total enrollment in the LAUSD.
Oh, you didn't have the graduation rate for Latinos?
Just it's low.
Yeah,
It's 63% for Latinos.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much.
DJ.
I agree with actually both of these folks in different ways. On one hand, you have to treat every student as an individual, but what I bring to the table is a deep understanding of how to use these numbers, and I think it's actually. And I deal with the district data all the time. So, yeah, our district is predominantly Latino. But the thing that's interesting about it, so 74% is average across the district, but many of our schools, like in the Southeast, are 99% Latino, or in the Northeast are more like in the 80s. The only reason it's as low as 74% is because in the Valley and the West Side, we have some schools that have 20-30% white kids in them. So what we have is actually a huge disparity between schools going on. And the African American population is even more interesting. They've really compressed in the last 10 years into really just a few schools. Fremont High School used to be predominantly African American, and I think it's down to about 8% or even lower now. And now there are only a few schools like Dorsey, Crenshaw even is mainly Latino now. So we had a big demographic shift, and the issue with the low graduation rates is really particular schools having very, very low rates. So Eagle Rock can have a high rate, but in these concentration of schools, they have a low rate. So I think we really need to focus on those schools. Something I just learned from my own research recently is I'm doing a project with Bethune Middle School and Fremont High School and Dinelly High School and Rivera High School now that is designed to get kids out of middle school, starting with middle school kids all the way through high school into college. And I've noticed that the highest performing kids out of Bethune Middle School don't go to Fremont. I thought it was really interesting that they're going all over town. They're going to Poly. A lot of them are going to Bravo Medical Magnet. And so what happens is that Fremont gets the kids who are already stacked against them. The odds are stacked against them. So basically the solution is to really focus, and we're already doing this, on Fremont and on Dorsey and on Jefferson and on Huntington Park. And then the whole rate will go up. And I'll say one other quick thing.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I'll say it before.
Okay.
Sorry.
Say it before. Okay. And
Well, is 87% graduation.
Yeah.
I have the number right now.
was there about, we can do this, I'm sorry, who did we start with? I'm sorry, we started with Mr. Rodriguez. Would you like to do a 30-second rebuttal?
No, I think I'll just say that I think your proposal, Mr. Kaiser, actually also helps solve the Prop 39 issue in terms of getting more classrooms and to keep them in the traditional system. So, which I actually agree with. I want to do that.
Thank you very much.
I want to use my...
We'll go to Mr. Kaiser, then we'll definitely get to you, Mr. Thomas. Don't worry, we won't forget you. Mr. Kaiser?
Yeah, the third good thing about LAUSD student performance is that we just took 12 gold medals in Skills USA, where our students in vocational programs and vocational classes went to the national championships and took gold as a team and individually. So if you're going to do applause, you should be applauding these things about what the student achievement has been, because it's been excellent. You see these students who, more to come.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Thomas, your rebuttal?
I'll let you do that one thing to the graduation rate issue, because I just saw this data earlier today. We had a graduation rate of 67%, I believe, in 11-12, and it went up to 77% this year, which is a really great success. The district has a plan to bring it up to 68% next year, which I thought was pretty, because they have this idea that they're just going to increase the graduation rate 1% at a time. And that's an issue I've identified with the way that the instructional plan is done in the district. They don't have what we really should be looking at is that 77%, and if we grew by 10%, then we should go by another 10% maybe next year and not by 1%.
Thank you very much. Now, the time is 7:53. We have 1 hour and 7 minutes left in our candidate forum, which is quite well, and we have been here since 6 o'clock. So, right now, we have a pile full of questions. I have a table full of questions. But, okay, let me see, how many more do you have?
Wait, definitely have one, two.
I have 2 right here. I at least have 6 more questions, okay?
Is that
But, it's a lot, but I know that you guys have been doing, you gentlemen have been doing a fantastic job answering the questions. I would like to extend to you this opportunity. Would you like to take a break for a moment? Or would you like to keep on going through? We're doing this democratically, so I'm going to give each candidate a chance to say yes or no. We're going in order. There's no pressure. But would you like to continue on to proceed into the next hour and 7 minutes, or would you like to take a 5-minute break? A 5-minute break. So, Mr. Kaiser?
Yeah, people promise to come back in 5 minutes.
I can't guarantee it. So that's 1 for, are you voting for the break or for no for the break? I need to hear a yay or nay.
I'll take a break.
Okay, we're going for the break? Mr. Rodriguez? Okay, we have to take a break.
We asked the audience if they're going to stay for another hour. I mean, I want to make sure that we honor their time.
I am.
Okay. And we have one more vote there, Mr. Thomas? We say yes or no for the break?
Yeah,
Why not?
Okay, so great. So we will take a break and for 5 minutes, okay? So we'll